Hands out of sight. That is how she keeps them still. Not what to feel, what to hide. 3 weeks of practice produced that lesson, and nothing else. Below her, the 2 men kneeling in chains are not afraid of her, and that is the part she was not prepared for, and she has been preparing for everything. Her father leans forward. One of them dies today, he says. She can choose which one. The word that leaves her is not one, not the other. It will cost more than anything she has ever paid, and it is already past her teeth before she understands what the saying of it means. If you have ever stood somewhere and felt the distance between what you were supposed to say and what was already rising in your chest, do subscribe, cause this story belongs to you, and make sure you stay. The hall did not unfreeze all at once. Piece by piece it happened, a quiet unsettling spreading outward from the dais until the whole chamber was moving again, slower than before, with the particular caution of people who had watched something unexpected and were not sure yet what it would cost them. Around her, the rustling of a court rearranging itself. Someone coughed. Toward the throne the auctioneer looked, then away, waiting for a cue no one was offering.
Her father said nothing.
That was the part she had not prepared for. Anger she had expected. The cold correction she had grown up measuring herself against. The dismissal that left no mark visible enough to protest. Not him studying her face for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and then lifting one hand toward the auctioneer with the satisfied ease of someone who had already decided something and was done thinking about it. My daughter's acquisitions, he said. Process them. The face she had built stayed where it was. At the edge of her vision, Ines stood holding a glass of wine she was not drinking from. Years of court events had produced the same image. Ines with a full glass she was not raising. Vanity, Myra had always thought. A choice about being seen to want things. She filed that attribution and kept walking. The viewing box door closed behind her. In the corridor outside, the crowd noise dampened to something that moved through stone rather than air, and her steps were deliberate, and she had been practicing those too. People who leave rooms in a way that does not look like leaving, she had spent years studying. 3 levels below the main hall, the preparation chamber smelled of old stone and the particular chemical sweetness of the collar suppressants, faint and metallic and wrong in a way that turned the stomach. Ahead of her the guards brought the 2 men, the chains making a low drag against the floor that echoed longer than it should. The distance she kept said, "These are mine and I am not concerned." She was very concerned. What she had to work with, she counted. The list was short. She counted it again. On his feet when they entered. The dark-haired one. Managing it well enough that 2 guards had stopped watching him closely, which was precisely the kind of detail she noticed, and they didn't. Positioned slightly behind and to the left of his companion, the copper-haired one, in the exact place a man stands when he knows the other might fall and has quietly prepared to catch him.
Filed.
Not settled. Leave them, she said, when the guard began the intake protocol. Your Highness, standard protocol. I am deciding what standard means. Long enough she waited. You may go. They went. The door had not finished closing before the dark-haired man's legs stopped working. Not dramatic. Real collapses rarely are. He was upright, and then the copper-haired one was already moving, going down with him in the controlled drop of someone who had rehearsed this, who had held this particular weight before, and the way he caught his companion said everything about how long they had known each other and how afraid he currently was. Across the room she crossed. What is wrong with him? Green eyes the copper-haired one had. She watched him run the calculation that every mortal ran when they looked at her, the fast math of what she was and what that meant. He completed it quickly. He was angry. Already sick when they took us, he said. The collar dosage they gave him is for someone twice his weight.
He told them that.
A pause that held the specific restraint of someone not saying the worst thing they could say. They didn't change it. Beside the man on the floor she crouched. The chain connecting his collar to the wall ring had been pulling against his airway. Her hands adjusted it before she made the decision to, and she registered that as a problem to examine later. 2 fingers to the side of his throat. The pulse was too fast and too light, and then he shifted just slightly, his head turning with the weighted movement of someone caught between sleep and something worse. His lips moved. "I know you," he said, barely audible, aimed at something inside a dream that had nothing to do with this room. Never before had she met him. Not once in her life. Her fingers stayed against his throat. The fever was burning through every rational framing she had been building since the auction floor. She filed it the way she filed everything she was not ready to look at directly, in the place where the list was growing. "His name," the copper-haired one said, watching her. "I didn't ask."
Adrian.
Quiet. Then, "Mine is Declan," said the way you say something when you are making people real in a room that would rather they weren't. The fever heat of Adrian's skin was the specific quality that meant the body had stopped reasoning and begun to fight, and she had not touched a mortal in a long time, and the warmth went further than she had prepared for. The door opened. One knock. Then Ines. Through the doorway she moved the way she moved everywhere, with the quality of someone who had measured the room before entering it. The glass was full. It was always full. "You surprised everyone," Ines said. "I wanted a project." Ines's gaze moved to the man on the floor. It held there for one beat past what the situation required. Not appetite, not contempt. The specific attention of someone reading something they recognize in a place they had not expected to find it, checking it against a record that existed somewhere Myra could not see. Then her eyes moved on, smooth and unhurried. "Father is amused," she said. "Currently." The word did its work. "You'll want to separate them. Less manageable together." "I was planning to." She stood. "Take this one to the east holding wing." Declan's voice came from the floor, controlled and low. "He is not stable enough to move. He will be cared for." Without warmth, because warmth here would be the thing that broke her cover open, and Ines was still at the threshold. Without looking at Declan, she waited while the guard arrived and the door closed and the sound of the chains receded down the corridor. The room went quiet. The collar's suppression hum filled the silence. Cold the stone floor held. Even in summer. Adrian's breathing, still too fast, still working harder than it should, filled the chamber until the walls felt closer than they were. A moment she did not count. She stood there. Then, in her white jacket with the lace cuffs against the stone, she knelt, her palm flat against his forehead. The heat of him came through her hand like an answer to a question she hadn't finished forming, and to the empty room she said, very quietly, "I don't know how to do this." Not that she wouldn't try. She chose. The problem was practical. Twice she told herself this, which meant she did not entirely believe it. Adrian's breathing had steadied by the time she stood from the floor. Still too fast, but not climbing, and that was the difference between urgent and critical. Everything she knew how to do, she had done. It was not enough. Cool cloths, the chain repositioned so it no longer cut against his airway. 2 sips of water gotten past the fever before his head turned away. Beside him, she had sat for longer than the situation warranted before the conclusion arrived that had been waiting for her the whole time. She needed someone who understood what his body was doing. She needed Declan. 2 guard checkpoints the corridor from her chambers to the east, holding wing crossed. Hundreds of times she had walked it without counting the people at either end. She counted them now. The precise number of steps between each station, the quality of the light at the corridor's bend, how long a purposeful but unhurried pace would take from one end to the other. 40 minutes before her absence became something worth noting. 14 already used. 2 turns from the first checkpoint, Ines appeared at the far end of the corridor. A different glass. Same deep red, still full, held loose at her side. Through the space, she moved the way she always moved, as though she had measured it beforehand. "Walking the territory," she said. Not quite a question. Checking the investment. Myra did not slow. In beside her Ines fell, natural, unhurried, nothing in the motion that looked like interception. The The copper-haired one has been giving your guards an education, she said. They tend to, mortals in confinement, respond to injustice with such intensity. Almost fond was the tone, the fondness of someone describing a predictable mechanism. Pain doesn't frighten them. Not really. What mortals fear is being seen doing the wrong thing in front of people who matter to them. That shame, the social kind, the witnessed kind, that is the lever. A guard who understands this doesn't need force. Agreement Myra made a sound of. Observations like this Ines made regularly, conclusions arriving one layer deeper than they should, drawn with the precision of someone working from evidence rather than theory. Intelligence she had always attributed it to. That attribution she filed and kept walking. Young and recently stationed was the checkpoint guard, who stood slightly taller when she approached. Your Highness. The acquisition from Cell 4. Secondary chamber. Unbound, water and first nutrition provided. I intend to begin assessment this evening, and I don't want him degraded before I start. The half-beat she let sit. Is there a problem? No problem, Your Highness. Good. Through the side entrance they brought Declan, and the guard withdrew to get the key. The far wall she studied and thought about nothing, which was how she cleared her face when she had 20 seconds and a great deal to hide. He came in with his hands visible at his sides, the posture of a man who has decided not to give anyone a reason to reach for restraint. His face ran the same calculation she had watched it run before, except faster this time, and landing somewhere specific. Not hope. Caution in the shape of hope. How is he said. Breathing steadier. Fever holding. The collar compounds a temperature spike. You need to know that. I don't know what it needs. That's why you're here.
The door closed.
Inside the wall behind him the ventilation system hummed, a frequency that belonged to modern infrastructure and not to old stone, and 3 counts she let it run before she spoke. I'm going to tell you something, she said. Before I do, you should know that I have several more persuasive things I could say instead, things better designed to earn your cooperation. Not going to say them. They're not true. What I'm going to tell you is true, and I have no way to prove it, and I need you to hear it anyway. He looked at her. He did not answer. That was its own kind of answer. I want to get you both out of here. Not what I'm going to extract from you for doing it. Not what I'm going to use, once you trust me.
Out.
Both of you. No plan yet. No resources I need yet. One window before my sister decides the situation is more interesting than I've led her to believe. He was quiet. That's not the thing you actually wanted to tell me, he said. Perceptive. She had noted that in the preparation chamber. He said something, she said. When he was feverish. Before you were taken out. The ventilation cycled. He said, I know you. Not in this room when he said it. Somewhere else entirely, saying it to someone in whatever he was living through. Never before had I met him. She stopped. A very long time I have spent building rational explanations for the things I do. For staying I could not build one. That absence is its own kind of information. The change in Declan was not dramatic. Very still he went. Not startled still. The stillness of a person hearing the last piece of something they have been holding incomplete for a long time. He said that before, Declan said. Quiet. Something had come out of his voice that was not usually missing from it. In fevers. Since he was young. Always someone in the dream. Always that same phrase. He looked at her, and the math in his expression had stopped looking for the exit. Who it is, he won't tell me. I don't think he knows. Nothing, she said. Nothing was there to say to that. He's going to be furious with me for telling you, Declan said. Probably. A breath. Then another. What do you need? What she knew she told him. The collar interaction and the fever, the wound she had found and what she had done with it, and what she hadn't been able to do. He listened with a precision that told her he had been trained, in a field she did not need to ask about for longer than he looked. 3 questions he asked. Each one was the correct question. When she finished, on the floor he sat, flat-palmed on his knees, and he breathed. Across from him on the stone, with her white jacket dusty at one knee, she sat. She waited. "All right," he said. 2 syllables. Relief she had expected. What arrived was more complicated than relief, and did not require a name. The same weight, just distributed differently now, across 2 people instead of 1, and that changed the shape of it entirely. To the door she rose. 37 minutes, she had been gone from her chambers. At the door this number she ran, and it landed wrong. 37 was the edge of what could be explained as routine administration.
40 would not be.
She moved faster than she had coming. She chose. There are women who have stood exactly in this place, where honesty is the most dangerous thing they could offer, and offered it anyway. If you are still here, you already know why.
Stay.
What comes next changes everything. Back to her chambers in 33 minutes. The math was wrong by 4, and the reason took a moment to land. She had stopped tracking time after leaving the secondary chamber. Simply walked. The corridor had passed the way corridors do when the body knows where it is going, and the mind has gone somewhere else entirely. Adrian had not moved. His breathing was still too fast, but the quality of it had changed, less fought, as though his body had reached some negotiated position with the fever, and was holding there rather than climbing. 2 fingers to his forehead she pressed. The heat had not broken but had dropped, the specific lessening that meant the effort was costing the body less. Her hand stayed there for longer than assessment required. Assessment, she told herself it was. To the window she went. The courtyard below, still gray, that particular gray that has not decided whether it intends to be morning. She checked the door, then the connecting room, then the door again. Before she noticed she was doing it, she was straightening the items on the shelf, the water carafe repositioned, the cloth refolded, the empty cup moved half an inch. She stopped. She looked at her hands. About what Ines had said in the corridor, about the lever being the social kind of fear, the witnessed kind. She understood for the first time that Ines had been watching her for years, and she had been too close to see it. At the far end of the corridor, the housekeeping cart announced itself, at the first definite edge of dawn. A creak with a specific frequency she had been hearing every morning of her life and never once registered. This morning it registered. 8 minutes. Awake, she found Declan in the connecting room. Against the wall he sat, knees drawn up, eyes already open, nothing startled in the way he looked at her, which told her he had been awake for some time.
"Someone's coming," she said.
"I know." Already rising. "What do they need to find?" Quickly she told him. What the court expected, what the specific performance of casual ownership required, what he would need to be, and where while the inner door stayed closed. Intake becoming readiness before she finished speaking. That was how he listened. "I need something from you first," he said. A message sent through a channel you can't monitor. Between them the request sat. Exact and quiet. 12 hours, he said. Probably less. Again she heard the cartwheel. Closer. "After," she said. At their usual time the attendants arrived, and found what they always found when nothing was wrong. What they actually found was Declan positioned near the door, with the contained stillness of someone occupying a role he has accepted and will hold, and at the window Myra in the posture that meant she was not to be approached. The room smelled of cold stone, and the residue of candles burned to their ends. The fire needed tending. They tended it, and left without once looking at the inner door, which was what she had needed them not to do. Something she had not identified as held until it was gone. She let out. When the door closed, Declan made a sound. She took a moment to classify. "You're very good at that," he said. "At what?" "Looking like nothing here costs you anything." Without edge, he said it. He was looking at the shelf. "You straighten things when you're afraid. Might not want to do that in front of your sister." At the shelf, she looked. The water carafe was sitting at a slight tilt she had not left it at, wrong by just enough to be noticeable if you were reaching for it. So she would have something to do with her hands. For a very long time, she had lived in the company of people who managed her by watching her for weakness. What that looked like from both sides of it she knew exactly. This was not that. This was something she had fewer defenses against, someone who noticed and said nothing, who adjusted the situation so she could be exactly where she was without it costing her anything extra. Old enough she was to know that the capacity for surprise at being treated with care was not innocence. It was the record of every time care had been withheld. The distinction she understood. Easier to hold the feeling for it. She did not find. For the carafe, she did not reach. At 11 Ines arrived, precisely when she would have arrived if she had planned it to fall between the morning report and the midday movement of the household. Their father's document, she set on the table without commentary and looked at the closed inner room door for one measured beat. "How is the project?" she said.
Slow.
Holding out longer than expected. Myra kept her voice at the level of mild inconvenience. The sick one. Not a question. A confirmation. The specific man she should not yet know was sick, named before Myra had told her which was which. Fever breaking? The room did not change. Nothing moved.
Getting there, Myra said.
In the way she nodded when logging rather than accepting, Ines nodded and left. The door clicked shut behind her with a quietness that was, somehow, worse than a different kind of sound would have been. Until the footsteps had cleared both the door and the corridor beyond it, Declan said nothing. She knew which one to ask about, he said. Yes. Before you told her. Yes. Back to what he was doing, he went. Nothing to do with the information yet, and they both understood this, and the knowing settled into the room with them like a third presence, patient, content to wait. Nothing she straightened. She noticed that she was not straightening anything. What to make of the noticing? She was not sure. By early evening, through a method she chose not to examine, Declan's contact came through. By the time the light through the high windows had shifted to the color it turned in the last hour before full dark, Adrian's breathing changed. Not the volume of it. The quality, the specific release of a body that has been working very hard for a sustained time and has arrived somewhere it no longer needs to fight. Her palm to his forehead, she pressed. The heat was wrong in the other direction now, cooler, the clean coolness of someone genuinely at rest rather than merely overwhelmed. Her hand stayed there. Across the room Declan was doing something methodical with the supplies, movements quiet and unhurried. At him, she did not look. She watched Adrian breathe, in, pause, out, the steady intervals of it, and kept watching for longer than she had any reason to accept that she was not ready to stop. He'll ask your name when he wakes, Declan said, from where he was. He always does after a bad one. Wants to know who was in the room. Her hand did not move. He already knows it. He won't remember knowing it. A pause that had something considered in it. He'll want to know it again. She did not answer. No previous announcement had the thing that almost reached her face. Barely she caught it, just before it arrived and held very still, and then understood that the catching was the part that surprised her. Not the feeling itself. The feeling she recognized. She chose. From the chair, she had not moved. Monitoring the fever was what she told herself, which had been true for 2 days and was less convincingly true by the time the third morning arrived. By then the chair was where she was because she did not know what else to do with herself, and she had stopped trying to build a framework for that. Carefully, he woke. Not the disorientation she had expected from a long fever. Not the reaching confusion of someone returning to an unfamiliar ceiling. His eyes opened and immediately went still, and the quality of that stillness told her he was running the assessment.
Where? Who?
How much time? Approximately 4 seconds it took him. For a long time she had practiced at meeting a gaze that was evaluating her. Being evaluated by someone who was clearly hoping to find the thing that would make him feel less of what he was already feeling, that she had no practice at. His eyes found her and stayed. How long, he said. His voice had the roughness of disuse. 3 days. What his body would allow he tested, careful and methodical about it. Declan was across the room, and he tracked that too, and the calculation he ran between the two of them showed in the pause before his next sentence. I'd like to speak with him alone. Level was the request. Enough years she had spent in courts to know the difference between a request that meant what it said and one that was managing something underneath it. Something he was managing. What precisely she could not have named, except that the particular control it required was the same she recognized in herself when there was something she could not let out in front of the wrong person. "Of course," she said. She left. 3 steps into the corridor she stopped, telling herself she was giving them room, which was a reasonable thing to tell herself while standing with her back against the wall and no plan to move. The stone had taken warmth from the day, which meant she had been standing there longer than she registered, and she noted this and did not address it. About what Declan had said, she thought about her straightening things when afraid. Nothing she was straightening. Against a wall she stood with her arms crossed, which achieved nothing, concealed nothing, and was obvious to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Low on performances that were convincing even to herself, she was running. The voices inside stayed low. Not listening. Standing in her own corridor, which was her own business. Then something changed in how the sound traveled, not louder, just at an angle where the door stopped being a barrier, and Adrian's voice came through. "She was here," he said. Something Declan said she could not fully catch. The whole time. Not a question. The flatness of something being processed rather than received. A silence. "I said something." In the fever. A pause that had weight in it, the weight of something he had been sitting with since he opened his eyes. "I always know afterward that I did. I never know what." Many things had she heard said about mortals over the course of her life. Very little of it in that tone. The specific tone of someone accounting for a debt they did not know they had incurred and checking whether they had anything adequate to pay it. Her back against warm stone, not breathing at a normal rate. She was aware of both things and addressed neither. Then Declan's voice came through, directed not at Adrian, but at where she was standing. "You don't have to stand in the corridor," he said. Exactly where she stayed for 2 seconds. Then she went back in the same way it had the first time his gaze found her, with that same precise control. Something had reorganized underneath it. She was still learning to read that layer. "He told me," Adrian said. "What you did, while I was out." Past his shoulder she looked. "You needed help. You didn't know that when you claimed us." Not an accusation the way he said it. The way someone says something when they are running the facts they have and finding them insufficient for the conclusion those facts seem to be building toward. "You knew nothing about me." "That's not entirely true." He waited. "You said I know you to someone in a dream, not talking to me. Never before had I met you." She stopped. "A very long time I have spent building rational explanations for the things I do. For staying I could not build one. That absence is its own kind of information." In his face, something moved. Not softening. Something older and less readable than softening. The specific change that comes over a person when they have stopped arguing with something they already know. Away first he looked. Not certain was she that she had ever watched someone do that, and had it mean this particular thing. Since she sat down he had not looked at her again. The opposite of dismissal it was. By people who were experts at it she had been dismissed, and she knew exactly what that felt like. And this was the other thing, the weight of attention from someone deciding, very carefully, what to do with her. Quiet was the room. The particular quiet that settles after an admission neither person made directly. Still in the chair she sat. Out again, he had not asked her to leave. Through the high windows the day was ending in the way days end in stone buildings, slowly, the light going orange, and then not. From across the room Declan cleared his throat and said nothing. At a conservative estimate, a great deal the clearing of it contained. At him she did not look. At her, he did not look. A form of kindness this somehow felt like. The shape of 3 days the chair still held. Not leaving it, she was not going to, and no longer was she pretending to herself that it was about the fever. She chose. In the morning Ines came. Not at 11. Before the household had finished its first rotation, which was not when she came unless she had decided something. Nothing she set on the table. Near the door she stood and regarded Myra with the quality of attention that years of reading as intelligence Myra had spent differently reading now. "The Palace Pharmacy," Ines said. "2 withdrawals this week, both logged to your accounts. The second compound is specific. Not something you would need for yourself." Myra did not move. "I've been experimenting." "With what?" "Tolerance thresholds. In the register of something not quite asking to be believed, but asking to be left alone." She said it. "Not relevant to anything." At her, Ines looked, for a moment that had too much in it. "A dinner tonight," she said. "Your father wants to see the acquisitions." Patient he has been, but patience has a shape, and his is almost finished. A pause that was considered rather than accidental. "I told him you needed more time." "That was kind of you." "Practical." Toward the door she moved. "Bring them both tonight. Show him something worth the patience." When the door closed, with the silence, she sat for exactly as long as she could afford to, which was not long. Toward tonight she had been moving without naming it. The confirmation landed somewhere below the fear, in a place that felt more like recognition than dread. What was happening, she told Adrian and Declan. With the economy, she had developed over 5 days of working alongside people who understood the cost of words she told them. Without moving, Adrian listened. 2 questions Declan asked. Whether they were afraid, neither of them said anything about. If he could perform, she asked Adrian. "What do you need?" he said.
Cold. Controlled.
"Something I've already broken, and am managing rather than breaking." "Not anger." Anger reads wrong in that room. "Resignation. Occasional resistance, like the fight is still there, but the outcome isn't." At her he looked for a moment. "I know how to do that." She believed him. The believing settled oddly, in the way things settle when you have trusted someone without making the decision to and have only just noticed. For the specific purpose of making everyone inside it feel evaluated, the formal gallery had been built. The table seated 40. There because it was always there was the food, hospitality performed for guests who did not eat. A wax the candles burned that released something floral and wrong into the air, and never before had she noticed it, which told her something about what fear does to the senses. With both men behind her she came in. Every set of eyes in the room, she felt find them, measure, conclude. What she needed them to conclude she let them. Present tonight was her father in the way he was present less and less frequently, recognizable, available, the version that sometimes made her question how much she had imagined the change. At his right, Ines sat with her glass, full, untouched, watching the room the way she always watched rooms, with the patience of someone who has already seen how it ends. Myra performed. What the evening required, she did, demonstrate possession without cruelty, authority without effort. Alongside her, Adrian performed with a precision that stopped her cold the first time she registered it. A man making himself into exactly what a room needed to believe while being entirely something else. Resignation she had asked for. What she was watching was a man performing irrelevance so precisely that every eye in the room moved past him naturally, to her, which was where she needed those eyes to go. Not at him, directly did she look. Everything watched Ines. Midway through the meal, her father's gaze went somewhere else. Before she had always looked away from it, the way everyone else in the room looked away, developing sudden interest in plates and wine and the conversation of the person next to them. Tonight she watched. Without producing sound, his lips moved. On something between him and the far wall his eyes fixed. No physical location she could identify. Very interested in their food, the advisors nearest him became. Around him the room continued, accommodating itself to the gap the way a body accommodates a wound, by working around it without acknowledgement. Less than 2 minutes it lasted. Out of her chair, she was before the 2 minutes finished. A daughter refilling her father's water. Her left hand on his shoulder, easy and familiar. Her right hand at his side, where the ring of keys looped to the inside of his belt, and the third from the left was the one she had spent 3 days watching him use, and without requiring her eyes her fingers found it, and it came free with a softness that surprised her, the softness of something that had not been prepared for removal. The glass she set down. Back she stepped. In her chair, she was before the advisor across the table looked up from his plate. In her closed palm was the key. Her hand she kept in her lap. The rest of her face she kept where it had been all evening. Around her she listened to the dinner resume and held the weight of the small cold piece of metal that did not register on any scale that measured things the way this room measured things. This was the line she had crossed. No version of tomorrow existed that did not include the other side of it. Back to the person who had not yet done this, she could not go. That she understood clearly, in the particular way you understand things that have removed the option of misunderstanding, and the understanding was not frightening. It was the specific stillness that comes when the last door behind you closes and you realize you have stopped looking back at it, and you are not sure when that happened, and it does not matter. Across the table Inez's gaze moved to her. She met it. Her hand she kept in her lap. Her face she let be what it had always been in this room. For 1 second Inez held. Then she looked away. She chose. In the dark, from memory, she did the passage. Her father had shown it to her once. 9 she had been, and he had been the man she remembered, and he had pressed the panel behind the library shelves and called it a secret and watched her face when the wall moved. A game, she had thought it was. Not in years had she thought about it. Not until now had she needed to. Off one at a time came the callers. Adrian held still while she worked the key. Declan did the same. Something she had expected to happen when they came free, some change in the air, some confirmation. What happened was nothing, and then Adrian exhaled, very quietly, and she understood from the quality of that exhale that the nothing had been something all along, just something he had been carrying so long he had stopped registering its weight. Nothing, she said. At the passage she pointed. They went. Nothing she took with her. More she had thought she would feel. Nothing she felt at all. She was in the corridor, and then she was in the old orchard 3 levels below street level, and cold was the night air, in the particular way of things that have been waiting. Audible from here was the city, traffic and distance, and the ordinary noise of lives that had continued while her own had changed shape entirely. 6 days since she had heard it. She had not noticed she hadn't. To say something she turned. She did not say it. 11 minutes later the sound started. The exact count she knew because she had been counting without making a decision to count, and then the interval ended, and the sound was lights, and then the lights were vehicles, and then the vehicles were people moving through the court's lower entrances with the coordinated efficiency of people who had been planning this for longer than she had been planning anything. Her hands she put up before anyone told her to. Enough performing she had done to know that this was the performance the moment required. This she told herself as they moved her toward the gate, and true it was, and underneath it was the other thing, the part she was not examining, which was that resistance would have required caring about her own situation, and she was not, at the precise moment they let her out, thinking about her own situation at all. The second since she had last seen the passage entrance, she was counting. Distances she was calculating. Through the south gate they took her, and she did not see Adrian, and fine she told herself this was. This she told herself for 6 days. A series of rooms federal custody was designed with the specific quality of places that want you to feel temporary. Questions she answered. The answers that were true and unhelpful she gave, which was a different set than the answers that were true and useful, and the key to the difference the people asking had not yet found. Her entire life she had been making this distinction and was considerably better at it than the people across the table, which was something, though what she was not yet sure. Very still she kept her hands, which was new, and she did not examine it. 42 people the Senate chamber, held on the day they brought her in. At the table that was not the witness table, she sat and listened to a room discuss what she was. The quality of the language was words chosen carefully to describe something without acknowledging its full shape. A category she was. An exhibit. A case number assigned to a file in a system that had not known it needed a file for something like her. With the patience she had developed over a long practice of being in rooms where she was not the subject of the sentence, she listened to this. Midway through the afternoon session, a voice said her name. Her actual name. Not a category or a number. Her name. Said the way you say a name when you have decided to say it in front of a room of people who will use the saying of it against you. All at once the chamber did not go quiet. The way rooms go quiet when they realize they have not been paying close enough attention, it went quiet. She did not move. From the seats designated for supplementary testimony he had stood, and he was speaking, and what he was saying was a series of facts that no one in the room had given him permission to name. What she had done, what it had cost her to do it, what she was in his accounting, which was a different accounting than the room had been running. In the particular tone of someone who is not asking to be believed, only requiring the record to contain what he knows, he said these things. On the table in front of her, her hands went completely still. 6 days she had been keeping them still. Different from that, this was stillness that arrived without effort, the specific quiet of a body that has stopped managing itself. What you decide she is doesn't change what I know she is. I was there. The first person in that hall who looked at what I was and saw something worth the risk. That was her. Something the room held that it had not held a minute before. Other women in this country, there are who know what it is to stand in a room where two worlds have decided to use them as the proof of something. At gatherings they do not speak of it. In the pause before a decision they recognize each other, in the way a person holds still when everything inside them is moving. Not all of them found what she found on the other side of that pause. Some of them are still in the middle of it. Some of them are only beginning, and what they are capable of choosing they do not know yet. If this story found you at the right moment, it was not an accident. There are others here. Women who made their way to this place because something in them needed to be told that choosing yourself is not a betrayal. Subscribe and stay close. There are more stories where this one came from. Not all of them end this gently. Around them the chamber emptied the way rooms empty when they have run out of reason to stay. The 42 people and their files and their questions found the door, and then the door closed, and quiet it was in the way of rooms that have recently been full.
She did not stand.
Where she had been sitting she sat. Long enough she had been performing in rooms that the absence of audience was something she had to learn the shape of, and she was learning it now, and stranger than she had expected it was, and also not strange at all. Across from her at the long table, where a room full of people had spent an afternoon deciding what she was, he came and sat, and at her he looked, and at him she looked back, and nothing was between them that required management. For days she had been keeping the door and her chest open without admitting to herself what she was keeping it open for. She let it stay.
She did not catch it.
She held it. She had thought she was the one who chose. She had not yet understood that he had been choosing too.